On Aviation Podcast.
Hello there. Welcome to another episode of On Aviation Podcast. I'm here with my co-host Orlando. I am Danielle. Gonna give it to Orlando to give us a preamble on what's coming up.
All right, thank you, Danny. Hey, I'm very excited about this topic today. I think what we want to discuss today, based on what we're seeing here, is just a little bit of tech in aviation, and just to get a better understanding of what's going on there with tech in aviation. I'm looking forward to discussing that. Our subject matter expert in-house is Daniel on tech, and I'm eager to hear what we're going to discuss today regarding this topic. Thanks, Danny. Back over to you.
Thank you, Orlando. This week it's going to be an interesting one. We have a lot of stuff going on in the aviation industry that is a little bit tech related. We have airlines trying to get to their net zero emission target. We have EVTOL. We have also a lot going on with the 5G carriers versus aviation industry. So yeah, let's go ahead. So the first topic that we're going to take a look at today, Boeing is launching a data tool to chart path to net zero emissions target. So basically, it's a tool that's going to be helping them understand how much they're going to be reducing their emissions. And I think it's really nice to see the aviation industry get a little bit more serious about this. Especially at a time like this, whereby there's like an economic situation that I'm pretty sure is also affecting the aviation industry in some way. Last year, we did see a lot of things coming up with the aviation industry trying to basically switch to hydrogen as part of this plan. And there was so much that was going on in that part, because we have both the airports and the airlines that had to adapt to new stuff, and that's a whole lot of expense for both of these parties, and not to mention the time that it's going to take to switch to other sources of fuel. Well, I think it's definitely worth it, but I want to definitely see where this goes. This year we see a lot of more seriousness with that end, and I feel like there's so much yet that needs to happen. There's something Delta did want to, not Delta, I think it was Southwest, if I'm not wrong, but some airlines definitely did want to switch to hydrogen, and that's that has not happened yet. There's some experiments that have been occurring over the past few years. It's pretty much something that's definitely going to happen soon. But I want to hear from Orlando. What are your thoughts on this change?
Yeah, I think from an economic perspective, I believe it's difficult to do, because the first thing is that the emissions might have come down. The emissions quotas might have come down from governments. The free market didn't actually ask for emissions. Government asked for that because they have green mandates, especially in Europe. And so the airlines have been trying to comply with the green mandates. And so they've been trying to create these tools. I think I see that with the forerunner, to me, in my opinion, is Airbus, right? They've been at the head of this thing with this net zero thing. They actually have a project called Zero E, I believe, or something like that, where they outfitted a Airbus A380, and they're testing out different fuel combinations. And I believe a Rolls-Royce built a hydrogen engine the other day, and it was pretty cool. But just in my opinion, it's all driven from the top down, right? It's not market driven. It's driven from governments wanting to have a green objectives. Whether you agree with it or not, that's probably a topic for another podcast. But I think that's where it's being driven. Now, the economics of it is tough, because it takes a lot of research, and these guys are not getting this money just getting this money for free, right? Or they're not just getting money out of thin air. They have to earn this money to develop this stuff, and the needs payoff may be a little bit wobbly there. And so I think I read an article the other day that's saying that the aviation industry is not investing as much in green, and there's reasons for that in sustainable fuel, but there's many reasons for that. But that's what I think. But I had a question though regarding the green energy. Are you seeing different technologies being applied regarding, because I know Airbus is doing something, Boeing is doing something. There are other airlines that said, I think it was Southwest, right? Trying to look at hydrogen. So, what are the different technologies? Because I know that sustainable aviation fuel is a whole bunch of different things. We saw an article once where they're actually using cooking oil in France. So there's a whole bunch of different things that can go. What are the various things that you're seeing in terms of what is being used for this green stuff?
Thanks, Orlando. Yes, that's a great question. So I see a lot of technologies being implemented. The main ones that I'm quite familiar with is the hydrogen tech. And there are other types of fuels that are mentioned to be sustainable. And yeah, it's Southwest Airlines, actually. I think they were the first commercial airlines to bring sustainable aviation fuel. And I think that was in Oakland Airport. So basically, Southwest's goal was to replace 10% of its total jet fuel consumption with SAF, that's sustainable aviation fuel, by 2030, which is an important step towards its long-term goal to achieve like carbon neutrality by 2050. So I feel like there's I'm not sure there's a uniform method of getting to that point, but at the same time, all these airlines have the same goal, and I think as long as they're on the same page, I feel like it's a good move. But as you mentioned earlier, it is definitely being pushed by the government. I kind of feel the same way, but at the same time, I do see the positive impact. I like the environment. I like having making sure that whatever I'm doing is good for the environment. However, if I see the impact is too small or minimal, I generally just don't, not say don't care, but I don't think that there's a need of making some significant moves at an unnecessary time. So like right now, we're definitely trying to push this push right now with getting to net zero emissions. As of now, we have aviation being responsible for over 2% of global CO2 emissions, which it's high. It's definitely gonna go down with some time. Right now, we have also electric airplanes, which are nice. I see a lot of flight schools slowly adapting to that. There's some flight schools that have invested in getting a lot of electric airplanes, which is really good. I think definitely there's some sort of training that pilots will get in order to use instruments that might change because of this. But yeah, there's just so much that needs to go on in order for people to catch up to this. So I don't think it's going to happen in a very short time. It's going to take a while, but I feel like the changes have already happened. If airports had to randomly switch to containing hydrogen fuel, I feel like that would definitely have a lot of regulations be made, because I get that hydrogen is a bit combustible, more combustible than a regular jet fuel. So I feel like there's a lot of things that would need to happen so that they are stored safely at airports. At the same time, I'm thinking about how airplanes are going to be. So right now, we have aircraft being bought that is still powered by jet fuel. And yeah, that just shows that even if it's going to happen in the near future, it's not. It might take some time, but I'm honestly looking forward to this. To be honest, I want to see what impact it has on a short term, at least. If we have about 10% of aircrafts in the U.S. alone operating, I feel like we would be able to get enough data to understand where we're heading to. But yeah, back to what Boeing had launched. They had launched a tool called Cascade, which basically allows users to adjust different variables such as the use of sustainable fuels or electric propulsion, or also the replacement of older model aircraft, um, operational improvements, and other advanced technology to better understand how those factors could result in decreased carbon emissions over time. So this is something that definitely a lot of airlines or businesses in aviation might use in order to understand what exactly they can do to adjust their emissions. I feel like it's definitely a good move. This is one of actually data is vital for us to make sure that we're actually going in the right path towards this. So Boeing unveiled a beta version of Cascade in July last year, but it was not publicly available. And over the past year, the model has been improved so that users can project data out to 2050 instead of visualizing only a single point in time. So when you get to see everything on a chart, you definitely get a big picture of how big the impact's going to be. But I feel like even though with modern technology, there are some factors that are unforeseen. So that's just data that predicts it. It's not actual data. So I'm curious to see what analysts will come up with. What data analysts will come up with once they get to use this. I want to see how this might turn out. What are your thoughts on the tool, Orlando?
My question first is the tool a tool that is being used for sustainable aviation fuels, or it's being used on conventional JP5 / Jet A fuel engines that it's being used on those engines to check emissions, to be able to control emissions on those conventional jet engines, so to speak, or this is a tool that is being used on newer prototype engines for sustainable aviation fuels?
To my understanding, I think Cascade, because the tool is not available to us yet, but it is available to aviation businesses. This tool, as they explained, it's you can combine different variables, but I don't think it is limited to just specific types of jet engines. So you have the use of sustainable fuels, and at the same time you have electronic propulsion. I'm yet to understand. I'm yet to know if they support all types of engines in order to be a little bit more broad in getting the full picture. But I do expect it to be, because without understanding how each aircraft we have that burns jet fuel works, we're not able to get adequate data. So I do expect it to at least have a wider support of all types of engines.
Okay, that kind of makes sense, because the reason why I ask is because I know that I think it's GE. GE, whenever they make, like for example, when they make the Trent engine, the big engine, I think that engine goes on 777s.
Mm-hmm.
That's GE, Rolls-Royce Trent. Rolls-Royce is Trent. I am so sorry. So I think GE, when they do their engine, I believe they have a two setup that they do. Two things that happens. They sell the engine, and then they make an AI version of the engine on a computer. And then as the engine run in the real world, they are running the engine almost simultaneously on a computer. And then they can watch the engine on a computer, right? With certain variables, certain eventualities, like, if there is say a turbine blade that was designed that the material was substandard, they didn't know that, then they can't account for that, but they can probably have a probabilistic understanding of that. But what they're doing is actually running the engines side by side. The fictitious engine that's not real, just running by the machine learning algorithm, and then the real engine is running, and then they can actually predict that, okay, based on how you run that engine, based on the data you're set, the telemetry we're getting from your in the telemetry, it's a different thing. Based on the data we're getting from your engine as you run it, we expect that this is gonna happen. So you should service it now or do this to it now. See? So I know that I think GE was doing that. I think Rolls-Royce is the one that does the Trent engines, right? But I think GE was doing that, and that's something like that. So I was wondering if it's something like that. But from what it seemed as if it's just using some algorithmic, some machine learning algorithm, and pardon me, my friend, I generally don't like calling this thing AI because there's nothing intelligent about artificial intelligence, right? It may seem intelligent, it's not. It's just predictive algorithms, right? So I like to call it machine learning algorithms. So the machine learning algorithms that Boeing is using, that's mostly for anyone can put some variables in, and then the machine learning algorithm will kind of punch out and say, okay, just so I can understand, put out some data and say, okay, based on this engine you're running, based on this concept that you have, this would be your carbon footprint, so to speak. Is that what it is?
Yes, that's basically it. And you're right. This is not AI is very misused today. I feel like it's been a marketing tactic in the tech world. So whenever something smart happens with ChatGPT or all these other AI products, other companies tend to put in their quote unquote AI technologies in their marketing strategy so that they can basically have good consumer size, believing that their products are good. But in this aspect, it's not exactly artificial intelligence. There might be actual artificial intelligence in it, but when it comes to calculating data, this is something that has been there for quite some time. When you're combining multiple data input in order to come up with a prediction, this has been there before AI. And so if we are able to understand how much fuel is being burnt and how much energy is being produced, we can definitely get a prediction of how this will impact both the aviation industry, I think, in terms of cost, but at the same time, we can also see the emissions at the same time. So I'm not sure if they actually will have, which is something different. If they will have something that might show how much fuel that might be burning, so that they can probably give an estimation of how much the airlines will spend, or the company that might be running the aircraft with hydrogen fuel or any other type of fuel that's sustainable. But yes, to answer your question, it's a combination of data, and when you combine data and understand, like you explained it, there has to be some sort of simulation into it. So what I guess happened is they'd have to probably run an actual engine and put in the numbers in their system in order to have some sort of simulation. And once you have this simulation, then you're able to actually use that data against other data to give an accurate prediction at the end of it.
So that's very good. So thank you for explaining that. Boeing has been doing this for decades, though. They had a thing they called the Boeing Fleet Planner, right? Mm-hmm. And the Boeing Fleet Planner would be used by airlines back in the day before deregulation. So before deregulation, when the CAB system was in place, right, the Civil Aeronautical Board had their system in place, and the airlines would plan what airfare should be. And Boeing had a thing called a fleet planner. And what they would do, they would the airlines would put in what airlines they're working with, what the body size, wide body, what engine, whatever the aircraft. And then Boeing has the fleet planner would spit out a number as to what the airfare should be, right? And how much passenger they can expect. But that system was a little weird because the airfares was set by by CAP, by Civil Aeronautical Board, and they can only fly one set of routes, the routes that were authorized by the Civil Aeronautical Board because it was regulated. And so, but Boeing, but that being said, though, Boeing has been doing this for a while, and Boeing does other things like this too. So it just reminds me of that. I just wanted to mention that. But I find this fascinating, how Boeing is what Boeing is doing here, and getting into that space, and providing the thing. Boeing has always been like that, though. Boeing has always been like that. I believe Garmin is owned by Boeing, right? And I think ForeFlight is not owned by Boeing. So Boeing like to buy up these companies, that these techs, right? These high tech in aviation, right? So Boeing has been doing this for a while. So let's see what it comes up. But I'm eager to hear more if you have more to discuss on this. But I think this is pretty fascinating. It's an analytic tool that could be used to see what are the real possibilities for it's with something like, say, SAF, sustainable aviation fuels, because you could run some simulation and realize that it's not panning out to what we expect it to be in terms of, because I don't want to talk too long here, but the famous Thomas Sowell would say, all right, you ask 3 questions whenever anything is proposed. So we need to reduce carbon emissions. Use this one for example. Reduce carbon emission relative to what? Right? And then, relative to, conventional hydrocarbon fuels. Okay?
Right.
All right. The next question would be, at what cost? Right? Very, very important questions. And then you look at the cost and say, can we do at this cost? Does it mean that airfare will go up? Does it mean that air travel would slow down? Does it mean that less business, people will be out of jobs because less flights because of these objectives? And before I go to Thomas Sowell's third question to ask, just note that this 2030 is coinciding with most governments' mandate as well. So it's coming from the government. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, we leave it up to the viewers to decide. I like the mantra put down by a man called Gerald Celente. Think for yourself, right? So you think for yourself and figure out whether that's good for you. But to Thomas Sowell, question 3. So the first question is relative to what? The second one is at what cost? What financial, social, political, freedom, whatever cost you want to put at it. And the third question is, where is your data to back this up? What data do you have to back up this argument? And those questions are always important to ask whenever you're trying to drastically change any system like the one we have now. But I just want to throw this out there. But back over to you, Danny. Thanks.
Those are great questions, Orlando. Thank you so much. These are vital things to understand, to question actually, before you understand the impact of the change, and to actually figure out if it's going to be worth it or not. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is EVTOL. And for those who are unfamiliar with EVTOL, these are EVTOLs are basically electric vehicles and electric aircraft that can be used. Another term that's simpler, it's flying taxis. So electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft have been touted as the future of urban air mobility. So right now we're seeing them go a little bit more public. It's a little bit exciting to see this actually happen, because for quite some time people have been wanting to see flying airplanes, and not flying airplanes, but flying cars. And a lot of people had a different idea of how that's going to look like. And if anyone of you in the audience have watched the Jetsons, I think you pretty much expected the same kind of picture. But it turns out that picture.
Hey, I love Jetsons. I thank you for that reference. I love the Jetsons. It's cool. Meet George Jetsons. Let me not sing it here on a podcast, but it's pretty cool. I like it. Thanks for that reference.
Absolutely, it was my favorite cartoon long ago. I enjoyed watching shows or cartoons that would be a little bit futuristic and the things that we expect in the near future. And so this week we actually saw a little bit of progress on flying taxis. So right now we have the Biden administration said recently that it has formed an inter-agency team to develop a national strategy relating to advanced air mobility efforts. So that includes the EVTOL or flying taxis. And right now there's a team that's actually working on it, working on having some sort of blueprint. And this team involves the US DOT, NASA, we have the TSA, the FAA, and the FCC. And right now, this blueprint they have is basically putting out a picture of how the entire infrastructure is going to look like. So right now, they want to begin the operations at a low rate, similar to how helicopters are being used, and it's gonna have its own kind of not path, but routes on the air, similar to how helicopters or airports do, and they're gonna have their own helipads or what they call vertiports, and it seems it's a little bit out of the picture from what I expected, because what I imagined this is someone just going to their parking lot outside of their complex or house and immediately getting into their car and just flying about. But I think everything starts somewhere. Maybe we're heading there, but we have to definitely understand that this is a flying. This is something that's flying. It's a flying vehicle. It's going to be in the air, so there has to be some sort of regulations to it. There has to be a slow pace towards people adapting to it. I'm not sure how much of them are going to be in the air in the future. I'm not sure what the qualification to be able to drive these are going to be, but I'm excited to see that. Orlando, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's been a while. This thing has been a while. I think one of my favorite, EVTOL company is a company. I think it was a Silicon Valley called, I think Opener. It was cool. I think they call their Black Fly. Oh, theirs is super cool. Theirs is just ridiculously cool. And I've been looking at this stuff for a while. I think what the FAA is trying to do is just to work these people into the airspace system, because the airspace system is complex. And the truth is, flying an EVTOL is way simpler than flying an aircraft, right? Because it's like playing a game. Like, it's just like flying a regular drone with the two little joysticks, and it's the same.
Yeah.
Right. It's just that you're sitting in it. So.
Right.
I think what will happen eventually is that if once the system is set up where they can interact in the airspace safely, then you're gonna have people just flying out of their garage. I think, because currently you do have air parks, right? So people literally have in the air parks, they don't have garage, they have hangars, right? They fly into their home, right? They fly to their home, the air park. And they fly in. So that's a thing across the entire country. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be a thing. It's just that these folks they're trying to figure out how to incorporate this into the airspace. Just like how they're incorporating drones into the airspace. They have to find a way to incorporate this into airspace. And the airspace is going to be more and more and more crowded. So there's just so much to deal with. So I guess that, but just like you, I'm very eager to see where this goes, right? People just flying about, just jumping a thing. And then I can't, before I close out my thoughts on this topic, on this point, is the economics of it. Because I promise you, once things go sideways in the economy, you'll see less of these EVTOL thing unless the government is going to fund it. Because a lot of the funding comes from the private sector, from venture capital firm. And if they can park their money elsewhere that's less risky because interest rates are higher, you're going to see less investment in space. All right. So that should be a thing too, with that. So, and then remember, regulations don't make things smoother. They may apply for safety and so on and so forth. But the regulations tend to make things go a lot slower than normal, right? So that's just my thoughts on it.
Great thought about that. You just reminded me about when you mentioned the flight parks. There's something that came into my mind. There's fly-in housing communities. That's a thing, whereby you buy a house that's attached to a runway, so you can basically get out of your house and get into your aircraft and fly out, which is an actual thing. So that's one thing that I feel like is that's the one thing I love about here. There's a lot of deregulation to the point that people are comfortable having these kind of structures so people can fly about just anyhow. So it's I think we're definitely getting somewhere good with it. In terms of the costs, there's the I feel like it's there's some mixed feelings about it. I feel like people would definitely spend a lot of money unnecessarily on something like this because this is something exciting. It's not one of those things that I feel like in the tech world we look at something and you see like that's an unnecessary expense. It's something cool. It looks futuristic, but it's a gimmick. It's just something that looks cool, but it might not be as useful. But for someone who's thinking about flying over the LA traffic to get to LAX faster, or someone who just does not like getting through the New York, New Jersey traffic, and you can just fly building to building because how many buildings in New York have helipads? That sounds exciting. And for many people, I think if they have quote unquote disposable income for this, they would definitely invest in something like that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see what happens with people get their hands on these kind of aircrafts and when they come out to the public, how people are going to be buying these aircrafts. I'd like to see the rate of it. The other thing today they're going to be taking a look at is the 5G operations. So we've been having a lot of things going on in between the aviation industry and also the broadband. I'm not sure if I should call it broadband, but basically these telecom companies that wants to put 5G that wants to make 5G available to everyone, including nearby airports or within the airports, which came as a big concern because we have a lot of people who we have a lot of people who use their phones whenever they're within the aircrafts, and the bandwidth that the 5G network uses was said to be risky for some components in the aircraft. So specifically, it's the radio altimeter, which basically allows the aircraft to get to know the distance from the air to the ground. So if it did affect these tools, then definitely it would have some sort of impact or some sort of inaccurate readings for people who are landing or taking off from airports. But yeah, so far, I think last year, the end of last year briefings ended with the aviation industry having a deadline for them to move to different sort of tools, radio altimeters that would but there would be sort of like proof from the 5G broadband, the bandwidth network. So it's a little bit complicated because during that time the supply chain was not meeting their timeline, so they had to push it to this year. I'm not sure the exact end date of this deadline extension, but basically Garmin joined in a coalition to protect radio altimeters from 5G by basically creating a tool that would overcome this type of issue with the 5G network. So the aviation petitioners asked the FCC to reconsider last year, but that did not work out. So hopefully things do work out this year, so that we can make sure that at least people are safe flying. I'm not. What really has me a little bit upset about this is the push for 5G, which is unnecessary. To be honest, I think 5G is terrible still. It's not as good, even with where I'm at right now. It's just terrible. I'm not near an airport, just somewhere regular with good service. I switched to LTE 4G because it's way better. I'm not sure if it's the same for your Orlando, but I feel like this 5G was a little bit unnecessary.
Yeah,
And I feel like it's also.
with you. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think it's unnecessary. 4G LTE is fast enough. I think AT&T don't even provide it. They just do this 5G E thing, Edge, which is not real 5G.
Mm-hmm.
And because the frequency is so sharp, it's a higher frequency. It requires better line of sight, and so it doesn't work. And that's why radio altimeters, you beautifully said, your radar altimeter actually use line of sight. It bounces a signal from the aircraft to the ground. When it hits a solid surface, it's bounced back, and then it calculates the time it traveled, and it knows the speed of the wave, and so it calculates the distance. And so what they're saying is that if you have the 5G network, which is in the same frequency range, you can actually disrupt that. But again, as we said before, what are the costs? So we want 5G, and we're pushing 5G, because the broadcast commission, blah blah, all that good stuff. But at what cost? Is it really needed? I don't think 5G is needed. You talk about, the phone is fast, but you literally have to be standing right next to the pole. You can't be in your house because you pass through two houses and you can't get it. So I think it's a big sound about nothing in a sense, and most people don't even experience 5G, and most of us do not need it. I just think it's no doubt. I'm a big iPhone, I'm a big Apple product kind of guy, but I can tell you, it's like the iPhone 14. It's unnecessary. I have a 10, and the thing is just as good. the thing is good. Okay, so it's like all these development. It's really just to sell more stuff. I'm not saying selling is bad, because products are good, but in this case, when it comes at a cost like this, the cost to safety, the cost to business, the cost to other industries, when it's not really necessary, then you got to think about it. But anyway, that's what I think there.
Absolutely, you're right. It's absolutely unnecessary, and yeah, I feel like off late I've been I get a lot of issues with 5G. So it's been a constant complaint with my service provider about this. So I don't think it's something that the airlines or aviation industry should be pushed about. This is aviation. You're carrying people's lives in the air 30,000 feet. So no, I feel like there's some sort of priority balance here.
So I think if my memory serves me correctly, I think it is the telephone companies that are pushing, but the airlines are pushing back, saying that or the airports they're pushing back, saying, hey, it's going to be a problem. I think Honeywell is really working on hits radar altimeters to make sure that they're compliant and so on. But it is just a situation where one set's part of the market, one set of regulated people, which is the broadcast people, which really is a radio broadcast. But because phone transmit via radio frequencies, then the broadcast commission is involved. And I think because they have an interest, they are lobbying to get this thing done. And then the airlines are lobbying to push back, like, hey, dude, come on, guys. This stuff, it's pretty dangerous. Because if we are landing, what pretty much would happen if this is implemented and the radar altimeter is not fixed or adapted or modified to adapt to the frequency, meaning they would have to not be so close to the frequency, right? Because it couldn't interfere. If it's not adapted, pretty much what could happen is that you're flying in on what is called a Category 3 ILS approach, where you literally can't see nothing until you're like 50 feet above the airport, above the runway. And I'm sure listeners have seen that, where they can't see nothing, and all of a sudden the plane is stopping. Like, what? We're on the ground? I couldn't see outside at all. That would be considered a Category 3 landing. right? Auto landing, right,
Right.
in a sense. And so you need a radar altimeter for that because it's a radar altimeter
Yeah.
that allows the plane to be able to land like that. Airbus would have a problem because Airbus uses these radar altimeters for auto landings, right? And so
Mhm.
it will be a big problem. So at what cost? At what cost?
Yeah, it's. I feel like it's been an unnecessary push, but let's see how how this goes. Let's see how it rolls out by the end of the year. Since now Garmin and you mentioned Honeywell are working on solutions, I hope they can get to getting out the solution faster. Or actually, I think producing the actual equipment much faster because we're not able to meet the requirement last year. So hopefully we have a success for that because aviation is just best when it's safe. And yeah, I think that's something that people should be looking forward to or pushing is that, for safety. Uh, but other than that, I also want to see how this is affecting the private sector. I do have a lot of times we talk about airlines, but I do wonder how these private sector companies do handle this kind of situation, like private jet companies or people who do fly aircraft for different purposes. I feel like there's going to be some sort of changes on that sector. Orlando, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a very good point you made. We talk a lot about airlines because they're the ones with the heavy lifting power to lobby, regulations, and they're the ones we see the most of the time. The first thing
Yeah.
is that general aviation will not be affected, right? So we flying around our Cessna and our Pipers and our Duchesses and little aircraft won't be affected. Even aircraft that carry more people, like 6, 7 folks, won't be affected because they don't have radar altimeters. But as you stated, private charters do, right? Your Bombardiers, your Phenoms, these aircraft, your Gulfstream, they do use radar altimeter as well. And those aircraft generally have Honeywell systems in them, but they do sometimes they use Garmin as well, but they do use radar altimeter. But how do they? They do have a say, but the folks with the heavy lifting is the airlines. The airlines really have a lot more resources to punch at this stuff, right? And they have the most to lose. Not that private charter don't have anything to lose if an aircraft goes down, but if a 777 goes down with 400 souls on board, that's not cool, right? Not cool, not a good day at all. So, or a 380 goes down with 500 souls on board, that's not a good day. So,
Yeah.
they have the most to lose. But that's a very good point. It seems as if everything a situation like this would be the big brother would have to take. But big, I wouldn't like to use that term, big brother. Sounds too much like 1984, but uh, your older sibling has to take care of it, right? Like, okay, I'll go out there because we'll go punch them in the face because they're doing bad, or we'll go rough them up a little bit, but then we're like, okay, you
Yeah.
go, and then the charter guys sit back and go like, okay, they're taking care of it. Let's see what happens, and they can have their own say
Mhm.
too, right? But they would have to come as strength in numbers, while one or two of the major airlines can go tackle this stuff and get much more effect out of it. So that's what I think about it, actually.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great thought. Yeah, these are smaller aircrafts. Definitely are not going to be affected. But yeah, when you talk about airlines, there's a lot of more to it. There's a lot more people uh, being on the plane, and also there's a lot of stake to lose reputation, and also in terms of finance. But um, yeah, let's see how this turns out. And I think that's pretty much it. We wrapped up. Just to wrap up, we talked about pretty much what's new in the net zero goals for aviation. We talked about um, the EVTOLs, which are basically flying taxis. Looking forward to that, especially want to see how that goes. And a final word on that: it seems like it's going to be taking off at the end of next year, according to the FAA. But hopefully that goes well. I'm excited to try that out. And we also talked about 5G versus the aviation industry. Hoping aviation is going to be more safer as 5G rolls out during these days. But yeah, any final thoughts, Orlando?
Yeah, I think these are all great topics, are really good topics that we need to dive into. Generally on the podcast, we talk a lot about economics, but it's really good to just talk about some of the things that are happening out there outside of the economic side, and then kind of blend that in with the economics, the business, the pocketbook stuff, how it affects your purse type deal. But I think this was a really good topic, and I hope folks like this one. Really, really, really cool. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Orlando. Thank you so much for listening to to this podcast. And if you have any thoughts, anything to share about what we just talked about, feel free to leave any comment on the platform, on whichever platform you're going to be listening to, or on our main website, on-aviation.com. Thank you so much for being an audience to us, and please tell us what you think. Thanks so much, and have a great rest of your week.